I thought we could think about for the next moment or two is that there's still so much we don't know. And if you want to pick on my study with MBA students, that's fair enough. I agree. I have another study underway with real people, not students. No offense to the MBA students here. But there are some questions we don't still know the answers to. So for example, we know in the research on mentoring that dysfunctional relationships do happen. It's like a law of numbers. It's like dating, right? You have a couple of really wonderful dating situations, then you meet one who's, you know, where'd this person come from? You know what I'm talking about, right? So similarly in mentoring, sometimes you have mentors. By the way, in your companies, what is the requirement to be named mentor? Having achieved a level in the organization, yeah. And so for those who are all VPs and above, do they know how to mentor? Not necessarily, right? So sometimes I'm a mentor because I've achieved this level, and maybe I'm insecure, and maybe I give good advice, or maybe once I see just how talented this person is, I start worrying and wondering, what if he leapfrogs over me? So sabotage does occur. Dysfunctionality in the relationships can occur. Again, it doesn't happen all the time, but one interesting question to me, would be, is it more likely to happen in traditional relationships or virtual relationships? I don't know. I really don't know. Should organizations really administer these programs? One of the things we know about mentoring is that having a mentor, as I said before, is better than not. But having an informal mentor is actually better than having a formal mentor, for one of the reasons I just told you, right? Anybody who's achieved this level is thereby deemed a mentor. But when people come together naturally, organically, informally, those relationships tend to be more effective because they come together based on similar interests and values and beliefs. And so that the information flow is more real, it's less constrained. So should organizations make this a program, or should they just encourage people to connect with one another? So there's no real answers to this, but things to just think about. And the last thing I want you to think about is, from your organization's perspective, if you were to encourage the organization to start thinking about using e-mentoring as a way of building information, building networks, increasing cooperation across business lines and countries, et cetera, you know, are some of these benefits possible? What do you think? I'll stop talking now, and I'll invite you to ask some questions. We have our mic runners. Oh, we have lots of questions. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I think one area that I did not really see coming loud and clear is the benefit to the organization, where accountability and assessment of the effectiveness of this e-mentoring.
Okay.
For example, if it is not so effective, companies should not invest in that too much. So how do you really frame it in a way where management can continue to see a value to the organization more than to the mentor and the project?
Excellent question. Again, I think this is an issue of trade-offs, right? On the one hand, the beauty of a formalized program means that I, as a potential mentor, know that not only am I allowed to invest my time in developing this protege, I'm encouraged to do so. I might even be asked during performance appraisal time, what have I done so far? So on the one hand, those support mechanisms are great. On the other hand, do we really prepare people to be effective mentors? Do they have the right relational skills? Do they have the right desire? You know, is it just, oh wow, I'm VP and now I mentor, great, thank you so much. So one of the things that we could do to increase the effectiveness of formal mentoring programs is we need to look at the matching process. Why don't we let it happen? Why don't we, again, create kind of an ematch.com system and say, these are all the people who are willing to be mentors, and these are all the people who would like to be proteges, and give some guidelines around making the connections themselves. Because if it's like planning a marriage, right? If I tell you, okay, you two, you're going to enjoy each other, and you're going to learn a lot together, it may not be so effective. So that's one of the things that will help. Also, organizations that invest the time in actually training mentors and proteges. You know, sometimes the biggest problem is in expectations. I kind of thought that this person would do X, Y, and Z for me, and it didn't happen. So one way to increase the effectiveness of formal mentoring programs is to make them less formal as far as the matching process, and also I just forgot what I said. Also to do some training of the mentors and proteges about what to expect. So I know I haven't really answered it completely, but having a program says to the world, we care about you and your development. So now the question is, how can we tailor the program to recognize the changing world, people's interests, the importance of those organic connections? So I think we still have a long way to go. It's a good question. I saw a hand over here. Oh, wait, we'll go where the runner is first and we'll get you next. It's okay.
Hi, Suzanne. I don't work with e-mentoring, so I would like to hear from you some guidelines. How does it work? What to do and what not to do, what to guarantee, what to avoid in order to have some success. How do we design an e-mentoring program, for instance?
Okay.
Can you help me, please?
Sure, I'll try in the few minutes I have. Well, again, first of all, you have the choice. Do you want it to be formalized in your company, or do you want to just say to individuals, hey, we realize this is possible, so I encourage you to do this. But some of the advice I just gave over here, make the process organic. Make, both mentors and proteges, give them the opportunity to learn a little about the others, to choose. So we come together based on similar interests. Some training is important. And again, if you're going to have an e-mentoring program, maybe this training should be available as a webcast. Right? Let's be realistic. If you're putting an e-mentoring program together and say, okay, everybody fly into London so we can do, doesn't really make sense. You need to have some milestones along the way. You don't just put people out there and say, okay, you two go to it. But you might encourage them to say, every 3 months, talk about how is the relationship going? Is it working? Is it not? How do we do some things a little bit differently? There's a lot that can be done. And there's an article that I also shared with you from the protege's perspective. What are some things that are important to make the mentoring relationship work? And one of those things on the list there is to be mindful of the mentor's time and respect that. And also to give feedback to the mentor. Sometimes we forget that step. So if I get some really good advice here from Erika? Ilko. It would be good for me to send him an email, say, by the way, I did X, Y, and Z, and let me tell you how I benefited from that, so thank you very much. The mentors want to hear that. They take their time and their thought and the energy to give you that advice. It's a good idea. So when I sent my students off into these online mentoring programs, I gave them a list of things to think about in managing the relationship and asking good questions. Like, for example, you want to tell them not to ask questions that are closed, like, do you use empowerment in your company? Why not? Well, that's helpful. Learned a lot from that. But instead, you can guide them into asking questions like, I'm kind of on the fence about this empowerment thing. On the one hand, sure, I think it's great to give employees a voice and a chance to kind of do the work the way they see fit, but I'm a little concerned about my, you know what I mean. What if they mess up? Have you had any experience when you've mentored someone or when you've empowered someone? And so, to try to guide them around what kinds of questions would help promote the kinds of answers you can learn a lot from. I know that's just sort of touching the surface, but okay, good, I'm glad I was helpful. There was another question over here, as I recall.
Thank you for your presentation. I have experiences with both virtual relationships and also personal relationships. My idea is that there are also lots of disadvantages of being virtual only. Because body language missing, the eyes, and also overcoming shyness and discriminational issues or physical handicaps and all sorts of things. So people tend to hide behind their screen and stay where they are. And also in communicating, in writing, is always this perception is not reality thing. You cannot interpret. you cannot read between the lines sometimes, depending on the personal skills. So what are your views about that?
Another good question. Again, remember when I started, I said, when we say virtual and we mean not face-to-face, there's a variety of channels that could be used. So for somebody, for example, who's very shy, maybe the first communication might be email, and even the second, but then encourage them to pick up the phone. You know, you said X in your response, I'd like to talk a little bit more about it. Is this a good time? You can even arrange a phone conversation via email. How about Friday at 2? Would that work for you? So I think that's helpful. You know, again, my recommendation, and if I had more time, and I'm going to do this in my session Wednesday afternoon, I'm actually using an instrument, an adaptation of a colleague's instrument, to get those who are in attendance to look at their own developmental networks. And so the idea, again, is not that you all should stop using your traditional face-to-face mentors and just use virtual ones, but when you think about the kinds of gaps that you currently have in where you are and where you want to be, and you say, I could really use some help from somebody who directs a business line in China. So this is something you can get. Are you missing the body language? Sure. Are you missing the ability to instantly get feedback and ask questions? But again, just because I'm sending email doesn't mean I can't then move up to phone calls or video conferences where you do get a lot of that body language. Does that help?
I just thought about lots of illusions also, just writing emails and talking virtually together, because there's miscommunication.
Sure.
Ask a lot for miscommunication.
And that's fine. And I would argue that there's also the opportunity for miscommunication when we're face-to-face, right? So knowing what the challenges are in each environment, I think gives the person who's involved in that relationship a chance to think through, well, I know that this could be a problem, so let me make sure I'm really clear. I know that when I send emails, really important emails, I reread and reread and read them 2 or 3 times to make sure I'm not insulting anybody. Right? We've had this experience before, I'm sure. So, you know, all of that applies, that there are pluses and minuses to all communication media. So now the question is, how do you make the most of the ones that you've chosen? Do we have time for one more question, or? Yes, one more question.
Okay, it's mainly about the point related to the whole truth when we're talking e-mentoring, but the e or virtual environments, why it got way too spread due to the fact that online you act how you want to be, it's not really what you are. So I'm not sure how this is hindering e-mentoring. Yani, you're hiding a lot behind your PC. In a lot of cases, what you're communicating is what you wish you are, not what you really are.
So what's your question?
I'm not sure what is the background of stating that this is the whole truth when you're doing e-mentoring, because in e-relations at large, it's totally not what you are. It's normally what you want to be.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the tough question. Do you have research to back that up?
Sorry, it has been always known from why... No, just a second. It's one of the main reasons, for example, why the different networking tools, specifically more things like Match.com, has exploded. So you're hiding a lot behind your computer.
Sure, you can post a picture of yourself from 20 years ago or 20 pounds ago, of course. There is the potential, of course, there is the potential for misrepresentation. But what's really interesting, in the research on computer-mediated communication, again, I didn't do this research, but I looked at it and I read it carefully as I was doing my conceptualization. It is counterintuitive, as I said, to think that because we're not distracted by how attractive, how tall or short or young or old or gray or whatever, it's counterintuitive that not seeing those things actually makes me more willing to disclose openly and honestly. So I didn't create this research, but that's why I say, you know, if we say they say that, we're projecting people that we're not, the research that I'm fully aware of actually says the opposite, that people get to disclose more honestly, more openly, and create more trust in the relationship when they are in this computer-mediated environment. So again, it's not a panacea, and I'm not saying go get rid of all your mentors, but realize that where there are opportunities to go outside your geographic region and learn from different people, you shouldn't feel somehow blocked from doing that. And of course, keep an eye on these issues of communication and miscommunication, but don't stop yourself from expanding your networks in ways that you might not have done so already. So I'm not saying I disagree with you, but there is some research that suggests there's a counterintuitive indifference. Yes?
Would you say that e-mentoring would be maybe more effective if it is like a mix of face-to-face and e-mentoring? Maybe even like one time face-to-face, then the rest?
I think that's a great point. In fact, what we know from the virtual teams literature is that the most effective virtual teams meet first face-to-face. And it's not exactly the same in the CMC, the computer-mediated communication, but again, what we're talking about is one-on-one relationships versus 5 or 8 or 10 on a team. So again, I think the best case to address a lot of these real issues is to, for the shy person, for example, start the introduction electronically. Hi, Bob. I was recommended to talk to you by Sam, and I understand that you've experienced an X, Y, and Z, and could we talk? And after the comfort level starts to increase, we get phone calls, we get Skype conversations, we get face-to-face. And even because we've graduated to face-to-face doesn't necessarily mean there may not be times when I'm transferred or you're transferred and I'm only available to you electronically. So it kind of goes back and forth. And again, knowing what you need to know to make the communication the most effective in whatever method you choose helps you think about, well, you know, I'm going to meet him face-to-face. Let me think about those questions. I mean, even in meetings that we have face-to-face, don't you sometimes bring notes with you? So for some of the issues of I want to make sure I ask all the questions and the right way, we prepare. So it's, you know, you have these choices. And my suggestion is to utilize all of them, and in particular, the ones that make the most sense. And think about not just all with one person, but in your networks, you have different people who help you with different challenges, different skills, different projects, different, you know, work-family issues even. So if you think about having different people in your network, you might have some that you only meet face-to-face, some that you have electronic relationships, and some that kind of go back and forth depending. I'm out of time. I thank you very much for your participation and your great questions, and I'll still hang around for a little bit longer if you have any additional questions, but I don't want to keep you from your croissant and coffee. So thank you very much.